We're here for the 7.1 to 7.5 review. Technically, it's 7.4, but let's go ahead and get rolling through this. So we learned earlier what an array list was and how it's slightly different from arrays, mostly that they are not fixed in size. They can be manipulated, and we call that mutable. So we can be flexible with how many things we add or remove. It's pretty awesome. We create them in a pretty different way, though. We do have to declare the data types that we're looking for. So in between those less than and greater than symbols, the left side of that equal symbol, so these ones over here, these definitely need to be here. When we're declaring this variable or this data type, we need to declare the data that's going inside of this array list. The ones on the right side technically don't need them, though I think it is a very, very good habit to make sure you put those in there just to double check yourself as we go through. Other things, array lists have to hold objects. So you'll notice we are using the integer class and the double class. Don't worry, they pretty much act just like the primitive data types would anyways. There are some methods that we have that you should know. These things are necessities when it comes to your AP test or even the test that we're going to give you guys. How to find the size of something. This is different than the dot length that we use with arrays. We can add any object that you want. You'll notice that this returns whether that was successfully added or not. Then we can add elements inside of an array, so squeeze them in between other elements where we say this is the index that I'd like this object to go to. All the other objects will kind of make room and scoot down. It will grow in size by 1. You can get any index that you'd like. You'll notice that it returns whatever element is also inside of that. You can set any index or kind of change any index if you think about that and say, hey, this index, I'd like to change it to be this. Take note, the object that is replaced actually is given back to you. That's a big one that can be really useful sometimes. And then, of course, the remove method. I'd like to take this one out. Again, it gives you back the object. The thing to remember with array lists is there are no gaps in these things. So as soon as you remove an element from the middle, it is actually going to condense down. Everything's going to scoot, 0 gaps for you. Useful kind of pictures for you to see the differences between arrays and array lists. The left side, you'll see a lot of syntax stuff where we use these hard brackets to really grab values and set values. Whereas with array lists, we find that we use a lot of methods to kind of get the same exact processes done. And again, you see another list over here of some of the things you can do. Take note, you cannot remove, add, or check if something is empty with arrays. There are valid ways to just see if the length is 0, but there are nice little methods built in for array lists once in a while. But we should feel comfortable with all of the methods that we're given on this chart for your array lists. We also talked about iterating over these array lists. Identical to what you do with your typical array. On the top here, you'll see that we use scores.length. Here in the bottom, it's a dot size instead, and it's actually a method that is ran. Since it can change sizes, we need to currently count how many items are there. And then accessing the elements is just different syntax, where instead of using the brackets, we're using another method called the get. But besides that, iteration with for loops, traditional for loops, relatively similar to each other. We also have while loops. This is another situation where we're just kind of taking a for loop, breaking it down into all while loops, and nothing really new in this one. But on the right-hand side, this one's really nice because this is really similar to how we would have traversed through a traditional array. The only difference is that we have the integer object here. Good news for you, if this is a little on the confusing side, you can just use int, the primitive data type. And that is, again, because those integer objects are those wrapper classes. And that's like the candy wrapper, if you think about it, where they wrap themselves around a primitive data type. So those really can act just like the primitive data types that you want them to. Traversing through is there's only one really big thing we have to be careful of, and that's when we remove elements. If you decide to remove an element from the middle of an array, you do have to adjust your I value to be 1 lower, just because you have to recheck that new index or recheck the same index because you deleted the thing that was there and something actually took its place. So you need to recheck it anytime you do actually eliminate any of those values. Try catch blocks for another big one. This is awesome. This is when we can stay safe with our computer programs and validate anything that someone types in. I need you to type in a number 1 through 6. Any words that you type in will not break my program. And again, this is a really useful aspect of our program just to keep things running. And so common examples, you're asking for something like an integer, and I give you a string. Uh-oh, that would traditionally break the program. Not today. Trying to open a file, don't know where it is, spelled it wrong. File not found exception. Oh, that usually breaks the program. Not today. And then, of course, all these other things, if you try to grab elements that don't exist or any other exception that you can think about, we can use a try-catch block to really remediate that issue before it becomes an issue for the program. Other things that you should know are just some basic and common algorithms that we use for both arrays and array lists. By no means is this an exhaustive list. This is only a list of the traditional things that we see kind of happening here. Usually it's determining minimum or maximum values. With that, of course, we can compute any kind of mathematical standard that we want with sums, averages, modes, means, things like that. You should be able to search for particular elements, access pairs, adjust things, rotate things, shift things, reverse things. All of these and then some are completely fair game for a test. For you guys, realistically, it's just about understanding the logic of how to perform that particular task and then combining that with the syntax for array lists rather than the actual arrays that we've been using previously. Also, things that you can see here, nice little try-catch blocks to kind of get you some code entry, validation of code entry. You can see build a scanner. Usually our try-catch blocks are driven by Boolean loops, so they allow us to kind of determine when something is finally official. Then we can go ahead and break out. Remember, the try block is the part where we put all the code that we're going to attempt that could potentially break. This line right here is a line that can really cause some problems if somebody enters in something that's not an integer. If we want to catch something in the catch block that immediately follows the try, you have an option of using a generic exception here, which means you would catch any issue that really pops up. Or if you are anticipating several different issues, you can specify a very particular exception, like an input mismatch exception, and deal with that separately than you might with some sort of array index out of bounds error or something. So usually what we do is we stack these on top of each other. I consider this exception as kind of the catch-all. It should be the last one in your list if you actually had them, but you can just stack those catches on top of each other and either deal with individual problems individually or kind of address all of them in the same exact means. Up to you how you really want to do that and how the program runs itself. But in general, that was a nice little 7-minute summation of what we've been going through so far, along with some of our scanner stuff that you guys probably are pretty in tune with by now. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll see you guys on the other side.